And hello, everybody. I know that I kind of said I wouldn't do this and that I was kind of done talking about this issue, but this is like a new level of weird. Somebody told me that he put this video up and I took a look at it, and like even by Aurini standards, this podcast is a dumpster fire. So I just figured, why not? Um, we might as well cover this and see, because this is like there's some insane shit that goes on in here. So I'm not gonna hold back when it comes to Aurini anymore. I was kind of for a while. I think, and as I've said, the reason I kind of turned on him, like, because I actually took his side in this to fight with Beckloff for a long time. But when he started, like, calling his detractors virgins and incels and talking about all the women he was having sex with and stuff like that, that was really kind of what made me turn on him. And we're going to go through this, and I just want you guys to know that this dude used to be like, maybe let's just do a bit of a character profile of Aurini. So Aurini was kind of like one of the OGs back in when Neo Reaction was around. Back when I was starting to get into this stuff, and I think it was like 2012 or something like that. Aurini was like the first channel I found that talked about, I don't know what you want to call it, like edgy political stuff, or kind of like what then was Neo Reaction. So like back then when he was kind of one of the big people in that. He always had a pretty big channel. I think by the time his channel collapsed, it was at like 16,000 people, and he'd get like 1,000 people a live stream. Aurini obviously made the Sarkeesian effect along with Benjamin Owen. He's was a key influence on me, on Millennial Woes. He was one of the inner party and kind of one of the founding members of TRS before they broke up with it. And what had kind of happened, for those of you who weren't aware, is Aurini used to be an atheist, and then he became a Catholic. Then he became like a radical traditional Catholic. And he geared his entire channel around being like a traditional Catholic channel. But what wound up happening was he fell in with some people called the Free Folk. And this combined with a debate with Pastor Tom, who's a friend of Beckloff, who's a pastor. People say Aurini lost that debate. I actually thought Aurini did fairly good in that debate. I didn't think he did that bad. But that combined with him joining a pagan cult alienated basically all of his former friends and all of his viewers, and his channel got taken down, which once again I think was really a travesty. Regardless of how you feel about Aurini, I hate this fucking taking people's channels down thing. But it's some people, there's some rumors that he was involved in taking his own channel down. I have no idea if that's true or not. But since his channel got destroyed, he's jumped from Twitch to like live stream to like Stream Me. And now he's gone from getting having 16,000 subs to getting barely seven viewers of video. Because he's just literally alienated everyone. And as he sits there in his dark apartment wearing his sunglasses, to this day, I don't think the thought has ever occurred to him that he did anything wrong, that he alienated any of the people like me who are now like making fun of him. I don't think he can comprehend it. And like you can see just how far he's fallen from this. This is fucking amazing. So let's just go through this.
Good evening, folks. As usual with these live streams.
So the deep lore on what's up with this dude is he has prescription sunglasses, but not prescription glasses. and he can't see without glasses, so he wears sunglasses indoors. And my understanding is he doesn't have the lights on to save money for his drinking and smoking, is what I hear.
It takes people a couple of minutes to get here. And so I'm going to spend the first 3 minutes pontificating.
Uh-oh.
So as you can see, I've got the monkey suit on. Fresh from work. I was thinking about recording one of my traditional easy chair
Sure, fresh from work. Sure you are.
videos. But number one, I'm tired. And number two, I'm not sure how thoroughly I can structure this video. This speculative lecture that I want to cover.
Uh-oh. Aurini's mannerisms, for those of you who don't know, are subject to wide parody. Because he always smokes, he always, like, has a drink. And he always has, like, ice cubes that he jiggles in, like, a really obnoxious way.
And another thing. In the movie The Last Unicorn, when the unicorn gets captured by the witch, who has a sideshow of monsters.
Where the
and
fuck
horrors,
has this come from?
the witch has to put a phantasm of a horn on the unicorn. Because if she didn't put that fake horn, everybody else would mistake the unicorn for just a horse. And like it or not, that's the world that we live in. That many people are veiled. They don't want to see the truth. They dismiss the truth as, good lord, exactly what they dismiss it as cosplay when they're cosplayers. They're happy keeping their heads down, ignoring what's going on, and there's not really much you can do about that. Maybe not much you should do about that. Maybe unicorns are just there for the people that want to see them.
That's like fucking Shakespeare right there. That is some big brained. The funniest thing is that whole thing just described Aurini and his constantly bouncing between movements, cosplaying, pretending to be a unicorn. But like, how fucking insane is that? Like, fuck.
And so this topic that I'm going to be discussing tonight,
Oh.
this is something I've been researching on and off for a couple of years now. Really trying to dig into it, get the sense of it, pull the pieces all together. I don't have anything definite. But I wanted to toss it out there on the
I don't have anything definite, that's why this video is an hour and a half.
off chance that anybody out there is listening.
Well, we're listening, Aurini. Probably not the people
Exactly.
you want to be listening.
Forget
but-
about them, focus on yourself and on your bros. So, you know what? I think you guys will find this interesting. I don't think we're going to revolutionize the world with any of it, but I think you guys will find it interesting. And I want to give hats off to Asha Logos. Asha Logos has an excellent series of videos on the Indo-European ancestors.
Okay, we're going to get into the Indo-European shit in a minute. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Asha is a concept in Zoroastrianism. Asha being the daughter of Ahura Mazda. It's basically the same thing as Logos. It's almost identical. It's one of Ahura Mazda or the Supreme God's attributes. So Asha Logos makes sense.
Ancestors and our true history, the heroism, the decency present. And this...
That's not the case at all. The Indo-Europeans were kind of assholes. One of the main reasons Zoroastrianism developed was like a reaction to how savage they were.
These videos of his have buttressed this theory that I'm working on. They're the other side of the coin.
Okay, something to keep in mind with Aurini is his modus operandi is every time he hears a theory, he develops it into a theory as to why he should be the one to rule society, to run the world. And you're going to see this. He's done this with body types. He's done this with Myers-Briggs. He's done this with RK theory. He will come up with some pseudoscientific theory to justify why he personally should run the world.
So I've been studying the paths of demons.
What?
And he illustrates the places where the demons weren't.
What the fuck does that mean?
So, with that said, now we're 5 minutes in. Perfect time to launch into the video proper. Gee, 7 viewers this late an hour. Thanks, guys. Yeah, sorry for the late hour.
Okay, guys. 7 viewers this late an hour. Thanks, guys. Granted, I don't have a ton of viewers. I only have about 20 right now. But this dude had like 16,000 subs.
And he illustrates the places where the demons weren't. So, with that said, now we're 5 minutes in. Perfect time to launch into the video proper. Gee, 7 viewers this late an hour. Thanks, guys. Yeah, sorry for the late hour. Like I said, I was working. I'm not working tomorrow, so I'm only going to be working 5 hours. The sickness of Babylon. The story I'm going to present to you
It's going to be
in this
incoherent.
video, in this live
And
stream,
pretentious. Let me know if the audio balance is okay, guys.
is that somewhere around the Bronze Age collapse,
What?
about, what was it, 1150 BC? Somewhere around there, during the late Babylonian Empire. Oh, and hey, happy birthday, Germanic turtle.
Okay, let me look this up. Was the Bronze Age collapse during the Babylonian Empire? I have to double check this. Okay, let's see. Bronze Age collapse. Okay, the Bronze Age collapse. I'm trying to find. Because I don't think that happened. I thought that Babylon was like earlier or later. Okay, late Bronze Age collapse. Okay. Okay, maybe it was. I don't know. It's kind of confusing at that point in time. We'll just continue on.
Somewhere around 1150 BC, Bronze Age collapse, during the dying days of the Babylonian civilization, which wasn't immediately impacted the way the ones on the Mediterranean, the civilizations on the Mediterranean were. Something went seriously, seriously wrong in Babylon. And ever since then, that was the root of it, I think. At least, again, it could go back further. But something in ancient Babylon, they started worshipping a bull deity, which they called Baal, which was just another name for Lord. Okay? So the name doesn't really matter.
What the fuck? No, that's not how it worked. That's no, dude. Okay, Baal is Canaanite. It's Carthaginian. It's it's Canaanite, Carthaginian, or Phoenician. It's not Babylonian. I mean, like, and Baal, like as he said, isn't the name of the god. It just means God. It's like El. But the Babylonians never worshipped Baal. The Babylonians worshipped Marduk. I'm pretty sure Marduk was a bull. Let me look this up. Marduk. The only bull deities I can think of from that part of the world that kind of spring to mind is Marduk and Mithra. I'm not sure if Mithra was around that far because Mithra is a Persian deity. But yes, Marduk is the calf of the sun. And he was associated with a bull. I think he's more associated with a dragon, though. But I don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
But they started worshipping a bull deity that an herbivore deity that wanted.
Yes, I know that Mithra is Indo-European, but there's a lot of cultural exchange during this time period. So there is like transitions between the Persians, etc.
The sacrifice of children. I'm going to be trying to tie four.
The Babylonians sacrificed children. Did they? Child sacrifice. I always thought it was more of like a Phoenician thing. I never really associated it with Babylon. No, the people who who are known for sacrificing children. Okay, because he's talking about Baal, and he's talking about child sacrifice, but that's associated with like the Canaanites, and that's like associated with the Phoenicians. So, is he talking about them, or is he talking about the Babylonians? Because these countries aren't even like that close to each other. They're completely different. So like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Four things together and bring them back to the collapse of Babylon. The bull deity, child sacrifice, usury.
Okay, the bull deity, who is not. Okay, so I don't know. Okay, should I say he's referring to Marduk and he's getting confused? Or is he referring to Baal and getting Phoenicia mixed up with Babylon? I don't. None of this makes any fucking sense. And people say, "Well, Argent, you make errors like this all the time." Yeah, this dude would never admit it though. Like none of this makes any sense, but he would never admit it, and he sounds like he's a fucking genius.
I should make that 5. Empire and vegetarianism.
What?
Have you guys seen all of these advertisements for the Beyond Meat hamburgers that are out right now?
What the fuck?
There's this place here in Canada called Tim Hortons.
There's gonna be an Argent Tries It where I eat one of those things. I gotta do it for you guys.
Which it sells coffee and donuts. Then they started selling sandwiches, the chili. They are selling hamburgers now, but only the Beyond Meat hamburgers. I've been seeing this pop up in my feeds on Twitter. They keep advertising.
Okay, well, no, like, Aurini, that's not really true. Okay, so they aren't selling hamburgers. They do sell, though, sausages. Like sausage, I don't know when you want to call them sausage rounds, but like sausage patties. So Tim Hortons serves like sausage patties as part of its lineup. Actually, if you ever go to one, the sausage, egg, and cheese on the biscuit is really good. They also have like chicken burgers and like chipotle chicken and that kind of thing. So they don't have hamburgers, but it's not as if this is the only like hot food item they have.
Advertising Beyond Meat hamburgers. To me, I'm seeing this absolutely everywhere. There's a massive push for these things. And the real irony of the Beyond Meat hamburger is even the vegans are opposed to it. The vegans will tell you that the Beyond Meat hamburger, it's. I'm not a big fan of the vegan diet, okay? But some of them actually study diets, food, whatever, and they will be the first one to point out that that's not vegan. The Beyond Meat hamburger is the most heavily processed, toxic, and poisonous thing you can say. Yeah, exactly. Virtuous troll. Still very processed, like beyond processed. So you can, hypothetically, there's some vegan food out there that is very, very nutritious. I'm actually cooking chili right now. It'll be done after this live stream. And, I was putting the beans in. I was hungry. I had some beans. They're delicious. Beans are good for you. They're the magical fruit.
Okay, I'm going to have to take issue with Beckloff. Beckloff was saying that beans don't belong in chili, but he's a fucking degenerate. Beans are like the greatest things ever.
Vegans aren't about processed food, over-processed food. And so while this thing might have the nutritional information listed on the side, all of the nutrients have been sapped right out of it. This stuff is absolute poison and absolute garbage.
Why is he talking about this?
And you might say...
By the way, the chili thing is important because this is part of him, because he's going to be attacking people who don't eat meat later on. So this is going to be like him being the person who should run society.
In God's name, what in God's holy name does the Beyond Meat burger have to do with Babylon?
It's a fucking good question. I was wondering that myself.
Well, look at our ancestors. Look at our Indo-European ancestors. Look at the Scythians. Look at the Germani. Look at the Celts. Look at the Romans. Look at the... We are descended from people who loved exploring, who loved wandering the steppes and the forests, who understood animals. We were one with our horses.
Thank you, Strider. I don't see a message, but if you want me to read something out, let me know.
And yes, and we raised cattle and goats, and we slaughtered them. We treated them well while they were alive, and then we gave them a decent death, and then we ate them.
What the fuck is this, Avatar bullshit? This, we took their energy back. I don't know.
Our ancestors lived off of meat and legumes and fruits.
That's not true.
Not the modern vegetarian. And again, we're doing vegetarianly loose.
What the fuck does that mean? They lived off of legumes and fruits, not the... Oh, thanks, Strider. I appreciate it. Sorry, I lost what you thought. How is fruit and legumes not part of a vegetarian diet? I don't get it. Isn't beans one of the main things you need in a vegetarian diet because it's one of the ways to get the amino acids and the protein and stuff that you need? What the fuck is he talking about?
Here, I understand that there's some vegans with very well adapted diets. I'm not trying to...
No, there aren't any. There aren't any.
I think you should eat bacon, but I understand. You guys wouldn't eat the Beyond Meat burger. But that's... the Indo-Europeans went in multiple directions. They went east, they went south, they went west, they crossed oceans. But when they went south, when they wound up in the Fertile Crescent, in the floodplains of the Fertile Crescent...
When the fuck did Indo-Europeans go there? They didn't.
And you get something similar happening down in Egypt. What'd they start doing there? They went...
What the fuck is he talking about? Egypt? The Indo-Europeans never went to Egypt. Egypt is a Semitic country. what the fuck kind of parallel? He's talking about like the degradation of the Indo-European society by talking about fucking Egypt. Egyptian is an Afro-Asiatic language.
From being foragers and ranchers to being farmers.
What?
They started growing wheat. And most of the peasantry ate nothing but wheat. One of the things that you find is that I forget where I read this, but it wasn't until
I made it up.
The 18th century that Europeans got back to the same place of health that we were thousands of years ago.
No, I don't believe that for a second. Okay, let me just try to unpack this for a minute. Okay, so firstly, Aurini, people ate grain thousands of years before. Sorry, I'm just trying to process this. The eating of grain happened long before agriculture was invented. The scythe was actually invented like thousands of years prior to farming, because, and I know this is kind of weird nowadays when we think about it, wheat is a naturally occurring crop. I mean, it's native to the Middle East, at least a certain type of it was. So humans would harvest the wheat and they would eat it and they'd make bread out of it and stuff like that. So it's not as if people didn't eat this before. The issue with a lot of things with hunter gathering is it can only support a very, very small population, and once it starts to grow, hunter gathering doesn't really work anymore. But and that's why you need agriculture to produce enough food reliably to feed a sizable population. So it's just, I don't know how much they actually ranched though. Like, I don't fucking know. This dude doesn't know what he's talking about.
When you look at the size of skeletons, right? If you look at how big people were, how well fed they were, cavemen lived better than people in primitive agricultural societies.
Okay, like that's true in some cases and not true in others. I mean, it depends how you define lived well. I mean, generally speaking, there's a fairly strong association between protein consumption and height. But yeah.
The agricultural revolution poisoned man. All right, the food that we started cultivating, most of it was absolutely terrible for us. And so you had very sickly people cultivating these lands.
Yep, that's definitely what happened.
And now that we've achieved greater wealth than we've ever had, there's this...
So, what he's saying is these toxic plants allowed us to create civilization, including the computer he's using to rant about us inventing agriculture. Like, I just... Okay, let's see where he's going with this.
Push to...
By the way, why is he drinking whiskey? Well, isn't whiskey made out of grain?
return
And what kind of fucking Italian shits on wheat?
to that agricultural revolution diet. To get us eating grains again, corn syrup, beyond meat and soy. In this era of absolute abundance, we're trying to starve the population.
Okay, now he's saying this in a completely retarded way. My understanding is wheat itself isn't... It's not that wheat itself is that bad, but there's a particular strain of wheat that I believe is called dwarf wheat that is very harmful and is much less healthy and has a lot of other stuff. things like that is the one that we produce now because it creates the highest yield. So we like mass produce like one of the worst wheats for you because it just produces the most. And that traditionally speaking, wheat and other grains were a lot more healthy than the modern like GMO bullshit. At least that's my understanding.
Let me check that chili. Speaking of. So why? Why would we be trying to starve the population when we are richer than we've ever been before? We have a cash for clunkers program. For crying out loud, we were handing over money so people could buy new...
I love how Aurini always thinks he's American. Dude, you're Canadian. You live in fucking Alberta. Like, the other thing with bread historically is because bread historically was made with much less refined flour, so it was a lot more. There's a lot more grit in it, like not just sand from the millstone, but just you had to chew it a lot more, and that and the lack of refined sugar meant that tooth decay was very uncommon back in the day. So yeah, what was I thinking of? Anyways, let's go back to this.
Pieces of metal to fly down the freeway. And at the same time that we're throwing away money like that, we're trying to get people to eat poison. The reason, my suspicion, is because people that are living off of grains, people that are consuming lots of sugar, they're more docile and obedient and easier to control. They don't question authority. They don't have an intrinsic sense of right and wrong. Maybe it's something about being a meat eater.
What the fuck is this? So if you eat grain, you're a slave. What the fuck is this?
You know, because you are on the same moral level as the butcher. There's a moral challenge in eating meat. There's an acceptance of the tragedy of life. It brings to the forefront the frailness of mortality and the necessities of justice that the grain eater never understands. Go back to Genesis. Go back to Cain and Abel.
Uh-oh.
Abel sacrificed meat and God was pleased. And Cain, the murderer, sacrificed grains.
That's some fucking like big brain theology there, Aurini. It's true. If you eat grain, God hates you. It's not God hates gays, it's God hates grains.
The grain diet, the high fructose corn syrup diet, leaves you physically and morally callow. Oh.
Okay, so like here's another thing that makes so my interpretation of that whole Cain and Abel thing is that only blood can pay for sin. The wages of sin can only be paid for in blood, and that's why Christ was necessary to pay for our sins through the blood of the Lamb, which is also something you see with. That's also how I interpret the binding of Isaac, that Abraham and all of humanity is corrupt and fallen and sinful, and we deserve nothing more than to be destroyed. We deserve nothing more than for God to demand us to sacrifice ourselves. But ultimately, um, the the penalty that Isaac was going to be used for was instead paid for by a sheep that showed up, which I kind of view as a forecoming of Christ. Same thing with Passover, where they killed the lambs and they put the blood on the doors, so that the angel of death would pass over their houses. Once again, you kind of have this metaphor of Christ's blood buying sin. Yes, that is what scapegoating refers to, is using Christ to pay your sin. So, yeah.
Obedient. Not brave, not courageous, not adventurous, but obedient. And this leads to the next one, empire.
What the fuck does any of this have to do with anything?
Our Indo-European ancestors
In Egypt.
were renowned for their sense of justice,
What?
for their sense of fair play.
No.
One of the Romans commented that none of the Germanics, none of them had discovered interest.
Really? None of them had to, that's because they were fucking primitives. I don't even know if they really had a real written language.
On money. They didn't want to own lots of things.
Yes, they
They
did.
wanted to own good things. They were minimalists.
No, they weren't. They liked owning shit. Like, where is this from? Have you ever seen like a Germanic? It's like a Germanic burial site where they have like all the gold and like they kill the slaves and shit and bury it with them. Like, what the fuck is this? The Indo-Europeans set up the caste system in India in part so that they could just take all the shit from
And
everybody.
they weren't cheap. And they also didn't form empires. Oh,
What?
they had war. Quite a bit of war, because war is absolutely wonderful. It is absolutely glorious. It is such a good feeling to bleed and make others bleed. But
What the fuck? Indo-Europeans didn't form empires. Indo-Europeans didn't form empires. Like, so the Persian Empire, that wasn't a thing, guys. The Persian Empire didn't exist. The Hittite Empire didn't exist. The Mitannian Empire didn't exist. What are some other earlier Indo-European? I'm trying to think. Was there an early, like, I'm just seeing. Let me see here. Historic empires. If people want to maybe like point some out in chat, I'm just thinking that the Indo-European early ones I can think of off the top of my head is Persia. I'm just looking here. Persia. Oh, the Median Empire. Okay, yeah, there's the Medians. The Macedonians, the Seleucids, the Maurya, whatever, the Indian one, those were Indo-Europeans, the Romans, the Greeks, the Sassanids. Most of the historical empires have been Indo-European, other than, I guess, maybe especially if you exclude the Cynic ones.
they didn't do it for cruelty. They didn't do it to dominate. See, the sickness of empire started with Babylon, and it infected the Romans.
What?
Which eventually led to Rome falling. And it certainly infected the United States. It's infected Great Britain. You know, the whole colonial...
What the fuck? Like, This guy's never been to war. Um, he was a reservist, but in the Canadian Armed Forces, but he did never go to war. But like, so Empire infected Babylon, and then Babylon infected Rome. Wouldn't Babylon have infected Assyria, who infected Persia, who infected the Greeks, who infected Rome? Like, wouldn't it be that way? I don't know.
Era was nothing but this periodic exercise in empire that's coming back to bite us in the ass. Empire always bites you in the ass, the same way that trying to have usury always impoverishes your society. But to have an empire, you need the obedient citizens. The Germani would never have gone along with empire. They say, what's in it for me, man? You know, like, war, I'm totally down for. That's fun. But what? I got my sheep. I've got my...
I mean, they did eventually form super confederations, and the super confederations were what overran the Roman Empire. Because, like, from my understanding, what happened was they kept getting their asses kicked by the Romans, and eventually they started to kind of emulate the Romans, and they started to get kind of more organized and get bigger kingdoms, etc. And then eventually you had the super confederations, which were hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Germanic peoples, and then they started migrating, and they were too big for the Romans to really fight off. And in almost all cases, as soon as the Germanic peoples took some territory, they were able to... They formed their own empires, be it like Visigothic Spain or Vandal or like the Lombards or the Goths. They immediately, when they got the chance...
slaves, which were indentured servants, they were well treated in most of
it was good.
Indo-European
countries. It was great. Slavery was fucking great in the Indo-European societies. It was fucking amazing.
Different situation.
Yeah.
I mean, you think they're slaves? They probably had more days off than us free people have today. I mean, like I said, I got my wife and kids. You know, we got our land, we got our horses, we got our cattle. Why do I gotta go rule over somebody else? What's in it for me? Marble palaces, get out of here.
Then why did they like
Minimal
raid each other and steal shit like whenever they have the chance?
You can't carry around a marble palace with you. The whole notion of empire really seemed to arise out of Babylon.
What about China? Let me see. When was the first Chinese empire? Okay, let me look at this. Okay, ancient Chinese era was 1600. When was the Babylonian Empire? Okay, so they were around the same time. The first Babylonian Empire was around 1690 BC, and Chinese civilization was slightly later than that.
So, that's two of them. Vegetarian diet with grains. Empire. Let's talk about the cult of the bull.
You would know a lot about that.
The most in-depth description we have of the bull comes from the Roman wars with Carthage. And this was still when Rome was clean, before they were an empire. Back when they were...
Sorry, the Roman wars with Carthage were how we knew about the Babylonian bull god Baal. Because the Carthaginians were Babylonian exiles. That's totally what happened.
Good old-fashioned city-state, the way that men were meant to live.
What?
And they went to war with Carthage for...
I thought you just said he was against any form of the state. I mean, to have a city-state, you need to have agriculture. I don't know.
a variety of reasons, but also, like, partly, not to be ignored, is just the complete moral degradation of the Carthaginians. Mm-hmm. The Carthaginians would regularly, they'd have this big brass bull that they would heat up, and they would place their children onto the hands of this bull to be burned to death. And by the way, this is not mere Roman propaganda. This is like we found the dead bodies. We found the murdered infants from Carthage. The Carthaginians. Now, who were the Carthaginians?
They were Babylonians.
They were a Semitic people. And the Semitic people, like the Germani, are the western branch of the Indo-Europeans. The Semitic are the southern branch. Because Babylon comes from the same place as our ancestors do. Out of the Indo-European valley.
What the fuck is he talking about? The Semites are the southern branch of the Indo-Europeans, like the Babylonians. I don't think that that's the case. Let me see if I can find one, and we will take a look at this. Let's see, language families. I don't think that that's the case, Aurini. I really don't. I'm trying to find a language map. I'm not having a lot of luck. Let me see here. Okay. I'll try to find some maps. Okay. Now the Semites are Caucasians, if that's what he's referring to. That actually kind of makes sense. I don't think that's what he's referring to. Because not all Caucasians are Indo-Europeans, although all Indo-Europeans are Caucasians. Okay, so let's see here. Let's look at this map. You probably can't see it. I don't think you can see my cursor. But, so if we look at above where Israel is, that is where Phoenicia was. That's where the Canaanites came from, and that's where Baal's from. Now, Babylonia is down in what's modern-day Iraq, near the Arabian Gulf, so they aren't really close to each other. So the Assyrians, Babylonians, and Phoenicians all spoke an Afro-Asiatic language, whereas the only people in this area who spoke an Indo-European language that we know of was the Hittites, who are up in modern Asia, in modern Turkey. They're actually the oldest known Indo-European peoples. The Egyptians also spoke an Afro-Asiatic language family. Language. Let me just see here. So, the point being, this dude has no idea what the fuck he's talking about.
Strangely, though, you don't find the swastika with the, not to my knowledge anyway, with the Semitic people.
Yeah, because it's a fucking Indo-European... Because it's an Indo-European symbol. So no, the Semitic people would use the swastika. Like, what?
find the swastika in India, you find the swastika all over Europe, but you do not find it with the Indian people or with the Semitic people. Which actually, that makes me really wonder if part of the reason that the swastika has been so demonized is because it's such an ancient and holy symbol.
Yeah, because Semites aren't Indo-Europeans. It is an Indo-European symbol. Like, and here's my issue. This guy has no fucking... Like, these aren't mistakes. He obviously just made this whole thing up. Like, this is obviously just some theory he pulled out of his ass. But if you were to confront him about any of this, do you think he would admit that he was wrong? Do you think, like, he'd say, okay, look, I fucked up? No, he would double down on it. And he's saying it like he's this big fucking genius. And this whole thing is just a joke. This is, like, pathetic.
They try and pretend the Nazis stole it from the Hindus. It's like, no, no. It was in Europe. It's an Indo-European symbol. It's ancient. Now, of the Semitic people, let's be perfectly clear. There were the Phoenicians. I'm not aware of anything about the Phoenicians murdering infants.
I'm not aware of anything about the Phoenicians murdering infants. The Phoenicians... The Phoenicians were the one who engaged in child sacrifice.
They're the Hittites. Not aware of the Hittites murdering any infants.
Well, they were actually an Indo-European people.
It seems to only be select groups of the Semitic people that were doing this. So as I said, the best record we have of the bull worship and the murder of children comes from the Romans in their wars with Carthage. The second best records we have of Semitic people murdering children comes from the Jews.
From the protocols of the elders.
In fact, if you read the Old Testament, you read about Golgotha. We know where Golgotha is, and guess what? That is where Jews would leave the Jewish faith to go worship the bull god and sacrifice their children.
The bull god of the Babylonians.
Push them over the flames. And we found Golgotha, and there are plenty of remains of dead children there. We have Moses going up the mountain.
In Babylon.
He comes back down, and what are the Jews doing? They are worshipping the bull god of the region. The Semitic bull god. So you have this massive, like the Old Testament. When the Old Testament talks about the pagan gods, not just that, there's, who was the prophet that met an angel? And the angel was delayed because he was trying to get through Babylon. And whatever angel was watching over Babylon, presumably a fallen one, was preventing him from getting across. You have this constant conflict going on throughout the Old Testament of the Jews, of the prophets, of the kings, turning towards God, while everybody else in the region is going towards the bull god. Everybody else is going towards demon worship. And the final thing, again, is money. It's money, and as soon as you invent money, you get usury.
I've never heard a real explanation on how you run an economy without debt. I actually don't get how you would run an economy without debt. The only real viable alternative I've seen to usury is Sharia finance. I should read some more about Sharia finance, because Sharia finance is very fascinating. Actually, I could see like some traditional Christians getting on board with it.
You know, have you ever wondered why the Jews are a little bit prone to being hysterical? Imagine being surrounded by people that offer riches and worship a vegetarian god that demands the sacrifice of children. And that might be why Jews are a little bit obsessed with their rituals and a little bit hysterical at times. Because that's the environment they came out of. And yeah, the final one's money. Babylon is where currency was really nailed down the first time. And with currency, you get usury. You get the manipulation of the monetary system. Let me check that chili again.
Do we know this for a fact? Like, is this real?
Right there, girl. Oh, you want some chili? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes, every 7 years there's a jubilee which wipes out all existing debt. I don't know. There's different ways to interpret usury. I'm not really going to go into that now because it's not that interesting. But let's just continue.
Space Dog wants an egg on her food, but I have no eggs. She loves a cracked egg on her food.
Is there anything cringier than Space Dog?
So yes, usury. Let me define usury for you guys again. This term gets really bent out of proportion. It's not
Like
merely
you.
interest.
Okay.
It's not merely that, although I find interest pretty questionable as well. But, you know, futures markets are a thing, like it or not. Usury. Well, first of all, when you engage in fractional reserve lending, which inevitably all banks wind up engaging in that, 'cause that's why you open up a bank, is
So, does he have any like examples of the monetary system being like manipulated in Babylon?
that you can start loaning money at interest, money that you don't have. Because when you lend out money, you're not actually giving them a big sack of gold, okay? You're giving them some numbers on a piece of paper, and when they spend that money goes back to your bank, right? So you don't actually have to have the physical money to make loans, because any loan worth making is just going to be in numbers, and it's going to go back to your bank. So you only need a few $1,000s on hand, and you can lend a few million. And that's just what banking is, like it or not. Now, the issue with the system is that when you start doing that, when you start lending out money that doesn't exist and charging interest on it, you wind up creating more debt than you have magic Babylonian squares to pay it back. Traditionally, the way that we dealt with this was jubilees. Up until the past century, we were using bankruptcy law, understanding that there was a certain amount of debt that had to be wiped clean. But now we've managed to get into an era where we are making student loans to kids to get useless degrees that they can't pay back, and so we own them for the rest of their life. That, right there,
That's not how it works in Canada, though.
is usury. Student loans are usury. And I am 100% for complete student loan forgiveness right now. You know what? I'm going to have all my student loans paid off by the end of the year. I am still going to be for student loans.
How the fuck does Aurini have student loans? Like, I don't get it. He's Canadian, so he shouldn't really have significant ones to begin with. B, this dude's like 40. Did he go back to school or something? Like, and if he's poor, OSAP should have paid for most of his education. Education is not very expensive in Canada, especially if you're poor. So I don't know what the fuck like he's talking about.
Forgiveness. Because these loans were made under false pretenses for the sake of enriching billionaires and impoverishing poor students. So yeah, all these things go together. And the cult of the bull. Okay. This is the big one. There was a picture of the Queen Mother with a bull brooch on her dress. Very gaudy, very standoffish. Right? And the bull keeps coming up. We had the cult of Mithras in Rome. And I don't know if that was directly connected to the bull or not.
Well, Mithras is actually an Indo-European bull deity, so...
But the bull shows up in Carthage. The bull shows up in the Old Testament. The bull shows up in Babylon. That bull shows up in modern times. Shows up on the Queen's brooch, shows up in the Bohemian Grove. We keep...
Like, for context, I'm starting my master's degree actually in 3 days. So wish me luck with that. But I'm doing it like one course a semester. So part-time online, one course a semester in Canada is $2,200 Canadian. So which will take about 4 years. So I think my entire master's will be. Let me just pull this up. 2250 times 13. No. Was it 22 or was it less than that? Fuck me. Let me see how much it was. My whole masters will probably be something like $20,000 to $25,000 over a 4-year period, which is not very much money. Considering I'm going to get some money from OSAP, I'm going to get some money from other places, so it's like it's not that expensive.
Seeing the bull. I think that's at the center of it. The bull, child sacrifice, usury, empire, and feeding the slaves grain.
Sorry, I'm high. Of course, my tuition is $1,300 a semester. So 1,300 times 13. So it'll be about 17K Canadian for my entire master's. Oh no, I have to. Okay, actually, it's going to be more because I have to go to the school to do the examination. So that'll probably be another like 2 or 3K. So it'll probably be about 20 to 21K to do my entire master's degree. So let me just convert that into USD. So my master's will be about 15K American. So that's not bad at all.
And that's a little hypothesis. That's what I've been looking into over the past couple of years. Trying to figure out where all this evil starts.
From you? From the Church of
Because,
Satan
you study
founded?
our ancestors from Europe. And on the one hand, Christianity made absolute perfect sense to Europeans. There was one thing Ashologos points out in his recent video. The first book transcribed in the Gothic tongue was the Bible. Despite some claims otherwise, it wasn't a massive bloodbath forcing a Babylonian religion upon Europe. Quite the opposite. Christianity naturally integrates with the Indo-European faiths. It comes from an Indo-European root. The Jews are European, or Indo-European as well. They're the one group of the Semites that fought back against the corruption that was happening all.
The Jews are not Indo-European, Aurini. They aren't. That's the whole point.
Around them. So they do tend to have a very black and white, a very extremist view. And you see this with modern Protestantism, where Protestants, everything is black and white. They're proud not to know their history. I've heard utterly dismissive comments about Hinduism from American Protestants. It's like, guys, that's thousands and thousands of years of culture. You don't think they got a few things right over those thousands of years? Go read the Bhagavad Gita. Tell me that's a book written by savages. And yeah, certainly Protestant Christianity, with its complete black-white morality, has done a lot to harm the cause of God. The positive player. Looks like I joined at the right time. Well, you missed. I'm going to reiterate for the positive player. My theory, based upon a lot of stuff, is that out of Babylon, something went really foul. The Indo-Europeans, they went west to Europe to become the Germani, the Italians, the Celts, the
Greeks,
the Vikings, the Rus,
Greeks,
the Russians, etc. And they went east. We find them in India. We find them in Tibet. We find their roots everywhere. Tibet. And they went south down to Babylon, and something went really, really wrong.
Yeah, but they weren't Indo-Europeans already. Your whole thesis makes no sense.
Because listen, the early Babylonian myths are wonderful. The Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is wonderful. All right, like these are wise, heroic people that we see in the early days of Babylon. And then we get to the Old Testament. Then we get to Carthage. And what do we see coming out of the Semitic people of the Middle East? Oh, when will we reach Atlantis? Atlantis was the civilization that existed prior to the end of the Ice Age. Probably in Southeast Asia. So the flood was probably the end of the last Ice Age in 8000 BC. So the earliest records we have are about, like the earliest reboot of civilization is about 6000 BC. All right? So everything from before that was like memory. All right? But every single culture, you find the flood myth. You find the mention of gods and angels sleeping with women. You find that everywhere in the world. Probably the end of the last Ice Age. And yeah, some sort of human civilization. I suspect that some sort of human civilization existed before then. I'm not saying they had nuclear power, but some sort of established civilization.
The people who live in the Hollow.
Sometimes I wonder if nuclear power is even really that great of an accomplishment. But because, nuclear power on the one hand, pornography on the other. Yay, us. So during the Bronze Age collapse, something went really evil in Babylon. And 5 things. Child sacrifice, agriculture and vegetarianism, empire, usury, and the cult of the bull. That's what we get from Babylon. And I was contrasting this to the European pagans. The European pagans were not interested in empire. They were not
Wait a minute. The European pagans were not interested. Like the Romans were, the Greeks weren't. Okay.
Very cute pictures that we have. Thank you. They were not interested in empire. They were the kings led by example, not fiat. They had no interest in money. They were very generous.
No, they weren't. They were fucking
They
killed
were
each other.
minimalist. One thing I've talked about, the difference between minimalism and frugalism. Frugal is when you go completely out of your way to find the cheapest gas station.
This dude's just
like you get one of those apps on your phone. Where's the cheapest gas I could buy?
Dude's so checked out. I can't even believe it.
How much effort are you putting into saving like 30 cents? What's your time worth?
This dude is off his trolley.
Minimalist is you don't buy stuff you don't need. And let's top off the ice and stir that chili.
This is like a new low even for him. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? And like, none of this is a joke. This is all 100% serious. Aurini's not capable of joking. This is the best stream ever. This is super professional. This is like DSP quality streaming right here.
Ooh, good thing I stirred it, guys. It was just beginning to stick to the pot. By the way, one of the secrets, you want really good chili. When you're putting the ground beef in, put it in with some water. All right, it loosens it up a bit. If you can put it in with beer, then it goes completely caramel.
Why would you want caramel flavored chili? Like, why?
So yeah, let's wrap back to where we started with all of this. The Beyond Meat burger. As I said, Tim Hortons, a coffee shop that sells sandwiches, has recently started offering Beyond Meat hamburgers, even though that's not their business model. They don't sell hamburgers. They sell coffee,
Bulba, I think we're like way
and these
past
days
that.
sandwiches. But all of a sudden they're offering burgers. Beyond Meat burgers.
Well, they offer
which
like
are heavily
other
processed and
stuff.
absolutely disgusting. Absolute, like there's no nutrient value. And it might, I don't know how they taste. They will probably relieve the hunger pangs, but you are making yourself ill by eating them. I'm seeing Beyond Meat pop up on my Twitter feed. I'm seeing Beyond Meat absolutely everywhere. There is, I don't know who's behind it, but somebody is behind this. You don't get this much of a coherent marketing push across dozens of different franchises unless if there's a major push behind it. Right?
Well, that's
not
probably
even
true.
conspiracy, guys. If Britney Spears or whomever releases her latest album and you see it at Walmart and you see it at 7-Eleven and you hear it on the radio and you see it on the TV, it's because there's a marketing push behind it. Something similar is going on with the Beyond Meat. And yet there's something desperate about it, isn't there?
Okay, I'm not sure how much longer I can go on. Oh shit, we're only halfway through this, Travis.
I'm ragging on the Protestants. Let's go back. I'm always down for ragging on Protestants.
Yeah, well, what the fuck?
When you understand, when you see the beauty of Catholicism, the beauty of a Catholic Church,
Then you won't ever want to eat the Beyond Meat hamburger
when you see
again.
the transcendence implied by those flying buttresses, you can see that our ancient European ancestors saw the exact same thing. That's why when they heard about Christ, they said, "Sign me up. He sounds like my guy." The Protestants can't seem to look beyond their ugly little chapels and their literalism, their black and white morality,
They're talking about Jesus instead of my esoteric
which is
nonsense.
such a pretense.
Uh-huh. They say that my, like, fucking random women
You know,
is
you
bad.
see, original sin doesn't just exist in us, either. It exists in the very nature of the physical world. You know, with the pure mathematical, with two-dimensional mathematics, you can have perfect shapes.
What the fuck?
As soon as you go 3D, everything starts falling apart. Nothing is perfect in 3D. There is nowhere. You can find circles on a flat surface if you pretend it's flat. But as soon like the Earth is not a perfect sphere. None of the spheres in heaven are perfect spheres. None of us are perfect. We all have our flaws. Even the appendix, right? Like there's all these imperfections. You can't. It's the hairy ball problem of mathematics. That you can't take a hairy ball and comb it down so it's all nice and combed. There's always going to be that one point where it comes out and looks terrible. My buddy was getting his car detailed the other day.
Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just really tired and I can't do any more of this. If people really want, I'll finish this up tomorrow, but I'm just exhausted and I'm going to go to bed. So, hope you guys enjoyed that. This is just fucking the worst. I'll talk to you tomorrow.